Thanks for being with us on AM Agenda. With me now, our panel of politicians. Liberal frontbencher, Senator Mitch Fifield, and Labor MP Mark Dreyfus. Gentlemen, good morning to you.
Good morning, Kieran.
A big day ahead, a big week. It's a fascinating time of the electoral cycle. Uncertainty a bit on both sides after some backflips on the government side, some issues from Mr Abbott last week. Now it's all about the mining tax. Senator Fifield, first to you. The government says the big companies are paying much less company tax than what they should be. Isn't that a fair enough argument that they're putting at the moment, that the mining tax needs to be lifted at least to a degree?
Well, you can't trust this government's figures. They're talking about effective company tax rates of 13% and 17%. But what they're deliberately leaving out are the royalties that the miners pay. Not every industry pays royalties, and if you're going to be comparing like with like, you've got to be straight with the figures, and the government...
But the mining companies are telling Wayne Swan, apparently, and the government that they should be paying more. Behind the scenes, they're conceding, yes, we should be paying more. Now, if there is an agreement, won't the Liberals just be left in the lurch, left irrelevant to the debate if there is an agreement with the likes of Rio, BHP and so on?
Well, this tax, this so-called super profits tax, isn't what the mining industry were arguing for. The mining industry was saying, hey, by all means, take a fresh look at taxation, look at taxing on a different basis, but that's not what the government has done. The government haven't consulted with the mining industry. The government have brought this super profits tax out of the blue. It's threatening investment, it's threatening jobs, and I've got to say, what I think is the most extraordinary feature of this whole debate is the fact that we have a Prime Minister and a Treasurer who are actually demonising a sector of the Australian economy, who are demonising Australian citizens who happen to be mining executives and work in the mining industry. I don't think we've ever seen in recent Australian political history a government actually seek to demonise, denigrate and to impugn the motives of Australian business people and Australian industry.
Julia Gillard yesterday was urging the mining sector to get around the table and to negotiate. Let's recap a bit of what the Deputy Prime Minister had to say.
There are a range of tax concessions that apply to mining companies which enable them to reduce their burden of company tax, and that's why we come out with these figures of effective company tax rates of 17% for domestic companies and 13% for multinational companies. That means, Laurie, that there's room for mining companies to pay a fair share of taxation and still make very good profits.
Clive Palmer, the Queensland mining magnate, was on Sunday Business. He's not going to be negotiating at all. Let's recap a bit of what he had to say to Helen Daly.
No, I don't want a socialist country. I don't want a country where there are no jobs for people. Of course I don't. And no one's going to negotiate that. I'm not going to negotiate the jobs of my employees. I'm going to defend them. I'm going to make sure that they're employed. I'm going to go to the High Court if I have to, or do what I can to preserve the wealth that our industries have in Australia for the benefit of Australians. I'm not going to sell out the country. The Prime Minister and the Treasurer may do that if they want to, but I'm not going to do it.
Mark Dreyfus, what's your response, first of all, to Mitch Fifield, that the government is impugning the motives of some of the mining sector, and also the prospects of a deal? Because if you listen to the likes of Clive Palmer, even Twiggy Forrest, who says he's a mate of Kevin Rudd's, it doesn't look likely at the moment.
The only impugning that's going on here is the hysteria that's coming from the Liberal Party, the hysteria that's coming from the main financial backer of the Liberal National Party of Queensland, Clive Palmer. What nonsensical statements to make about a socialist country, which is what we've just had from Clive Palmer. The need is for this debate to be conducted in a measured way, for the real facts to be used, because we are talking here about the design of a tax that is a sensible tax. The OECD said over the weekend that it was an appropriate tax. Many miners, as you've already said, Kieran, in your introduction, accept that there should be a tax, and that's why the Deputy Prime Minister was absolutely hitting the nail on the head yesterday when she spoke about the actual tax rate, the actual company tax that's paid, not the headline rate with which some mining companies in their ads are seeking to confuse matters, but the actual tax that's paid.
But has the government, has it sold it well enough to this point? Because there does seem confusion as to exactly the merits of this tax. It's certainly split in the opinion polls as to whether or not it's worthwhile
We're
or
in
not.
the middle of a debate. We expected that there would be opposition from some parts of the mining industry, just as there was when the petroleum resource rent tax was introduced 25 years ago. There will be opposition. As the Deputy Prime Minister said yesterday, no one likes to pay more tax. But there is an acceptance that this is an appropriate tax, it's going to be an efficient tax, and it gives a fair return to the Australian people on the resources that belong to all of us.
Mitch Fifield, that argument, the government's confident is going to have resonance in this election year, that it's our resources, our dirt, and materials, minerals. What do you think of the politics of this situation at the moment? Are you confident the Liberals are on the right side of the political equation just months out from the next election?
Oh, no one's disputing that natural resources belong to the Australian people. No one's disputing that, and no one's disputing that there should be a fair return. What we are disputing is a tax which comes out of the blue without consultation that threatens jobs, that threatens investment. That's our issue, and that's the issue of the mining industry. And Mark talks about the pushback from the mining industry. Well, why wouldn't there be? You're employing people, you're seeking to run a business, you're seeking to do that the best way you can, and you see something come along that's going to threaten that.
Of course, absolutely.
Of course, you put your view.
But why shouldn't they be on the same level playing field as the petroleum industry, which has just seen the Gorgon development approved? It's a similar sort of rent-based tax as opposed to a profit-based tax as opposed to a tonnage. Why aren't they on the same playing field?
Well, for one thing, there's a massive retrospective element in what the government's proposing. It's not proposed to take effect for new investments. This will affect existing businesses. This will affect existing investments, and companies and individuals have made investments in good faith on the basis of tax laws as they exist, and they've been changed. So that raises the whole concept of sovereign risk and whether foreign investors can trust Australian governments to honour the arrangements they put in place.
Mark Dreyfus, a couple of fair points there. Your response?
This is just more of the fear campaign, the scare campaign that the Liberal Party is trying to drum up.
But why wouldn't companies just say, OK, we've got a better arrangement in Brazil, in Africa?
Because as the OECD said over the weekend, what companies look at is not just tax regimes, they look at the resource. Whether it's a mineable resource, they look at the employment conditions in the country that they're proposing the project for. They look at whether there's a skilled workforce, whether there's a stable country. All of those, there's a great big tick for Australia, and that's why mining companies choose Australia. That's why there's activities in the mining sector in Australia, and why the petroleum tax, this is the key one, why the petroleum tax has not in any sense acted as a brake on continued investment in petroleum and gas. The Gorgon project shows that in spades.
Okay, Mark and Mitch, just stay with us. We're going to check the news headlines, and we've got a lot more to talk about, of course, on a busy day in politics ahead. Stay with us. Let's get the news headlines, the latest news headlines in the Sky News Centre.